There's a lot going on this time of year at the Idaho State House. Committee meetings, bill proposals, and key debates that could shape Idaho's future. I'm James Dawson, state government reporter for Boise State Public Radio, and I spend my days from January to April sorting through the action at the legislature so you don't have to. Sign up for my weekly newsletter, Legislative Roundup, and you'll get each week's biggest news and developments from the session delivered straight to your inbox every Monday morning. Sign up for Legislative Roundup at our website, boisestatepublicradio.org.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. More Idaho Matters right now. Imagine being lost at sea. Kind of scary, right? Okay, now imagine you're lost at sea with someone you barely know. That's the premise of best-selling author Beth O'Leary's new novel, Swept Away. And we're lucky enough to have Beth joining us today to chat more. Beth, really nice to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. That was a beautiful pitch of the novel. I couldn't have done better.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I have to say, it's a great read. So give us a brief synopsis of this latest book.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. So the novel begins with Lexi and Zeke. They meet at the pub on the marina, and they go back that night. They kind of reconnect. Lexi is, she's sort of somebody that never really does anything for herself. So she has this spontaneous moment where she thinks, do you know what? I'm going to go back with this cute guy tonight. And they stay on his houseboat in the marina. And then they wake up the next morning and they find that they are surrounded by open ocean.
Okay, so here's what I found to be so funny about this is that, as you said, it's Zeke's houseboat, but Lexi was actually planning on staying on it because Zeke's dad had sold the boat, and then her friend bought it, and then she was staying on it. So neither of them realized that it was, the other person's boat, and there's kind of this bit of tug of war before they realize when they go up top that they are literally lost at sea. So where did you get this idea? I mean, because it sounds awful that you would have a one-night stand and then you're stuck with them in an ocean on a tiny houseboat.
Oh, but isn't it so, I couldn't let it go once I had the idea. It was one of those, because you're right, it's awful. What a cruel thing to do to my character.
Totally.
But I love, the kind of the forced proximity trope, as it's known in the romance genre, like kind of idea that when you kind of throw two people together and they're not able to sort of necessarily walk away from each other in the way that they normally might, then sometimes something kind of magical can happen. And I loved it as a kind of, it came to me really when I was playing with the, stranded on a desert island kind of ideas. And I loved the idea of doing something with a really small number of characters, almost kind of play-like, like in theatre. And at the same time, it was a real trend over here in the UK to buy a houseboat in a city, and it was sort of an alternative, flats being so expensive. And this was a few years back, and a few kind of friends of friends were kind of being like, I think this is the answer. I'm going to live in a houseboat. And, doing the research for this novel, you definitely realize that houseboat life is a very specific kind of life and it's not for everyone. So I think there were a few unfortunate houseboat purchases made around this time. And I kind of loved the idea of someone totally clueless, owning a houseboat and then, messing up and ending up, trapped in it with someone who maybe they just for one night. And it kind of gave me everything. I'm always looking in my novels for a slightly outlandish way to throw two people together that then I spend the whole novel trying to make feel as real as possible, so that even though, it's unlikely, don't worry, everyone, anyone who's in a houseboat, unlikely, but also I want it to feel super, super real when you're reading the novel.
Yeah. Well, why did you decide to make a bit of an age gap difference between Zeke and Lexi, and in particular, making Lexi older by 7 years?
Yeah. And do you know what? That kind of came about because Lexi's character really emerged for me first. She's a very strong, brave woman. She's kind of she would call herself very jaded and kind of almost like she thinks of herself as a bit broken and done with. And I loved her so much. And I guess I asked myself the question, like, who does she belong with? You know, if I was matchmaking her, if which I kind of am,
Uh-huh.
who would I pair her with? And I loved the idea that actually somebody younger might really bring out that kind of just remind her that she is still young and has her whole life ahead of her. You know, she's only 31 and she sort of needs that energy and somebody who has that outlook. And I also liked what it did to the power dynamic in the boat. I think I was very aware that, you know, it's easy to say like it would be very funny to be in this situation, but actually I was kind of asking myself, how would I feel if I was trapped alone with a man in the sea? And, you know, they
Yeah.
don't know each other that well. And I was really kind of conscious that she would probably also, particularly at the beginning, feel quite uneasy. And I thought if he was an older guy, it would also sort of create more of a like, I never wanted Lexi to be the sidekick, you know, I didn't want it to be this guy helping them survive out on the ocean and she's kind of
Hmm.
there to support him whilst he does that. Like that was completely the opposite of what I wanted. So I liked the idea of making her older because it also slightly added a bit, made her a bit more dominant in the dynamic, you know?
Yeah, it really did. And I have to say, I think there's some really poignant and serious moments in the book. I mean, in particular, when you look at both of their backgrounds as that unfolds and everything. And as you said, Lexi feeling like she was a bit broken. And I think that has so much to do with just what had happened in her life, right? But at the same
Mm.
time, it's a funny. Like, and is that important to you in your writing to make sure there's levity in your books?
Totally. That's a key thing for me is that balance between the groundedness and the realness and the kind of lightness and humor because I always think that the kind of you know I write uplifting books and I want you to feel I want you to smile and feel joyful when you finish them, but I kind of find that for me you experience so much more joy with the characters if you've seen them in a harder place and you know that they've been through things. So I want to kind of have that in there too. But I will say there's nothing worse than writing a note that I always leave for myself in manuscripts when I'm writing that always really frustrates me is I'll write like, make this scene funnier. And making something funnier is just impossible. You can own you're funny the first time or you're not funny. That's how how I find it when I'm writing.
So, one thing that stood out to me, and I wanted to ask you this, is that in some ways the houseboat almost felt like a mini character in the book because of the history of the houseboat. I think in particular its impact on Zeke and all of that history around the houseboat. Did you mean to make that happen?
Well, I think just because, I mean, it really is the only setting, like the boat and the
Yeah.
sea. I mean, we venture a little, later on without giving any spoilers, but I knew I needed to know it inside out, and I needed the reader to feel that they knew every inch of it. And I really do use every space. We're on the roof, we're in the bathroom, we're on the deck,
Yeah.
because I had so little to play with, and I wanted us to feel like we were, cramped in there with them. So it did need to. I'm so pleased that you felt it was a another character. And also, do you know what? I was short on characters, so I'll take what I can get because writing a book with just two people in was, one of the hardest things I've done.
So, as you mentioned, you said you write uplifting books. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I always feel that there is kind of a not a snob, but sometimes I think people think that rom-coms are kind of bubblegum books, and I have to
Mm,
say they're some of my favorites because I find the world to be so heavy many times,
mm,
and it is so nice to read a book that's light, that it's uplifting.
mm.
How important is that to you? Or is this just what you're drawn to?
Oh, I mean, both really. I love to read rom-coms myself, and I think for me, some of the most kind of powerful moments when books have really changed my life have actually been times when they have given me total escape. You know, when you're having a really hard
Hmm.
week and you just need to step out and into another world. And one of my favorite things to hear from readers is that my novel has help them, help distract them in a difficult time. And I just think there's so much worth in that. And in just in the joy. I find, quite often people will say to me, "Oh, your novels are my guilty pleasures," or something where I feel like saying there's no guilt. Like you can do something joyful and fun for you. Like I don't know. I'm giving you permission. Like read the fun book that makes you smile. That's okay.
And I think something with rom-coms is really the intricacy of relationships that play out
Mhm.
in not only this book, but other books that you've written, as well as other authors that write this genre. And I think
Mm.
we can learn a lot from these relationships because, I mean, in this book, yes, you just have the two main characters. But in other books, I mean, there are other characters. So there's a lot of times, yes, you have the two, romantic leads, but then you'll have friendships and you'll have, parent-child relationships. And
Mm.
so I think there's more substance in rom-coms than are given credit.
Totally. And why do we all sort of think that there isn't substance in talking about love anyway? It's almost as if,
Hmm.
oh, if the story's about love, then it's not as important to, some kind of sense that we
Right.
all feel like, oh, it's just fluffy if it's about love. But like, I don't know about you, but I mean, the love that I feel for my husband, the love I feel for my children, the love I feel for my family and friends, like that's like one of the most powerful human experiences. And I find it interesting that we do sort of diminish that, what's not substantial about love.
Hmm. Well, and what is, I mean, it's what gets us up in the morning, right? It's what I think if you actually stop and
Mm,
think about it, it is what motivates all of us to be in the world and how we are in the
totally.
world. Yeah.
Mm.
Y-
And the other thing, what you said about kind of the importance of those relationships and kind of showing the intricacies of relationships. Something that I occasionally hear is that my books give people an unrealistic expectation of men, but I think the opposite. Like, I love writing wonderful men who, when I hope that somebody who's maybe not in a happy relationship will read one of my novels and think, I want one of those because that's what they
right.
deserve.
And there are good men out there. So
Totally.
that's what I like too. Is like there are good men out there. So you have a huge following to the point that your first novel, The Flat Share, is a television series. What has this been like for you? Because I read that you wrote The Flat Share when you were riding the train back and forth from work. And now here you are, how many novels in? This has been made into a television series. I mean, what a ride.
Yeah, that's very well put. Yeah, I mean, it has been the most extraordinary. Like for me, becoming an author was my childhood dream. This for me is I am absolutely living my dream. And I really am only now, this is sort of 6 books in. I'm starting to think it might be really happening. And letting myself say, like, you are an author, like you're doing it, and it's not gonna, be snatched away by somebody who's like, oh no, you can't have that. That's too good. So yeah, it has been an amazing journey. But the flat share, so yes, I did write it on my commute to and from work, on the train, and I sent it, to a few agents, and only one of them ever wanted to read beyond the first few chapters. And it wasn't kind of, it didn't feel like the the story that it then became, because um it was a total whirlwind when that book sold to
Hmm.
publishers. It was absolutely life changing. It sold in 36 languages around the world, and
Wow.
I could not believe it. It was truly extraordinary. And yeah, seeing it turned into a TV series, standing inside a story that I had that was just my little precious story on the train, was just, yeah, the most surreal and amazing feeling. And I
Oh.
feel so lucky, honestly, every day that I sit at this desk and get to do this for a living. I feel so lucky and so thankful to everyone who reads my books. I really do mean that. Like, I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but I really mean it.
So this latest book, Swept Away, is on shelves in April. Are you writing another book? What's in the works next?
Yes, I am always writing another book. It's even with a tiny little baby, I'm writing away on my phone. If I'm not writing, then I'm not myself. So yes, there is another one in the works. I can't tell you anything about it yet, but I will say they're probably my most kind of bruised and heartbroken characters yet.
Oh, okay. Well, looking forward to it. And Beth, thank you so much for taking time. I mean, I know there's a huge time difference and you've got little ones as well. So thank you so much for making
Oh,
time for
thank
us
you
today.
so much for having me. It's been a total joy.
It's been our pleasure. We've been speaking with best-selling author Beth O'Leary about her newest novel, Swept Away. It is available in April. And that'll do it for this episode of Idaho Matters. Thanks so much for listening. And just a reminder, you can find all of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts.